Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show, your one-stop shop for weird news, spooky, and otherworldly and paranormal shenanigans. We'll take a dive into what's going on in creepy pop culture. You can follow Creepin' It Real Show on Twitter at creepin_it. You can email us at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, creepinitrealshow.com. Without further ado, welcome to this week's episode.
Welcome to the Creepin' It Real Show, and happy belated by now Mother's Day to all you kid mamas, pet parents, and motherfuckers. This is Miss Moni, one of your hosts for today's show, where we will be talking about Ted Bundy and the recent Ted Bundy movie on Netflix. But before we get into all that, I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Yardley. How are you today?
Everything's good. Can't complain. It's actually raining right now in Atlanta while we're recording, but I think that for the most part it is a needed rain, but there's a lot of great news that we have, and you picked a very interesting topic.
Nice. Yeah. Is it a cold rain out there, you guys, or is it like spring rain?
Spring.
Spring rain? Okay. Because we're getting, like, for Southern California, we're getting really cold all week rain. It's fucking up our traffic. Like, I don't know what's going on. But on that whiny note, Miss Christy, how are you?
I'm good. Happy Mother's Day to you, Moni, and
Yay, you too.
everybody out there, even the ones who are just married to a child. So sometimes you got mothering in that way too, because we all got our shit, right? So,
or like I said, anyone who's banging a mom.
Exactly. I'm doing well. Yeah, unfortunately in Atlanta this time of the year, we get rain. It's just a part of the seasons. And then we get the hella hot summers where you feel like you're going to suffocate. So I'm not complaining about our weather at this point. But yeah, I'm excited about talking about some killers and some fucked up people. And I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Well, speaking of killers and fucked up people, Yardley has two different trailers to talk about that I'm super excited about.
Yeah, in the last week or so, we had a couple of trailers that came out. We had the Child's Play official trailer number 2 and also the It Chapter 2 trailer. The Child's Play trailer came out. It dropped on a Thursday, and I'm pretty sure that both of you have already watched the trailer. I'll just give my opinions. Hell yeah! My opinions. Everybody already knew that I was excited for Child's Play. I thought that the trailer delivered. It didn't show too much, but there are some things that made a little bit more sense than they did from the teaser trailer. So all in all, I thought that Chucky looked pretty creepy, and also the fact that in the longer trailer, you get to see that this modern Chucky has the advantage of doing things like, I'm assuming that Caslin Corp sells like everything from cars to, alarm systems. So this Chuck is going to have an ability to be able to, hack into these different things, which will make him a little bit more terrifying because we're also connected, through whether it's the internet or, opening up your car doors on its own, blah, 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 or starting an engine. So it'll be so interesting to see how this version of Chucky is able to use technology to his advantage. So at least for the Chucky Child's Play trailer, I was pretty sold. What about you, Christy?
I agree. I'm really stoked about this version of a Child's Play. I mean, of course, in the 80s, this would not have worked because it did not exist. But I really like this type of subject for the doll. I don't think they can go wrong here. I mean, it's just, you've got so many opportunities to scare the shit out of people with the version of this doll and what goes wrong. And I have to say, like, seeing the doll is weird looking on still photos to me, but when you see it, like, in movement, it's better to me. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think it's the eyes. Like, he's got a glint in his eyes that makes him a little more, like, aware or menacing. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is.
The eyes are bigger. In the movement aspect that you're talking about, Christy, it actually moves like a toy as opposed to the other one.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
I just felt like the video or the trailer is better as far as for the doll aesthetics than the still photos are. It just lent something different that I was kind of like, oh, because like the still photos, it was just, they looked weird. And I don't know if it's because in my brain, I'm still seeing the old Chucky. So when I see the new one, it's like, this is weird. But he doesn't look very doll-like to me. He almost looks like a cartoon. But then when you see him like in a video, it's different. And so it didn't give me the same effect of like, something didn't seem off then. But I am now officially excited. I was kind of about the whole thing when it first was announced, but the more, first of all, their marketing is brilliant. And so I felt like I have to give the respect to that as somebody who's in marketing. I can totally appreciate a good marketing campaign. And then now getting a little bit more information of how they're going and the basis of the whole thing, of how the doll got started, makes a really good amount of sense. And I'm shocked that nobody has put something like this out there yet. Like this
Maybe they couldn't. I mean, as far as technology too, like flying drones or whatever else you can do, maybe we needed to get to a certain point of where it is, like Yardley was saying, all consuming and does everything for you a little bit. Like, I don't know. I think it looks like a mix between Saw, kind of, with like the torturing, like tying up, like longer kill looking scenes, and Stranger Things, because you see the kids like arm themselves to go after him, kind of.
Yeah.
The only little complaint I have already, which is really little, but still, it's coming out in June, and you can tell that it was filmed as like a Christmas time type of movie because he's a Christmas present, I think. So that's the other thing where I'm just kind of like, the vibe would have been super cool to have it during kind of the same time of year that was in the movie, but whatever. I think it looks awesome.
I could see why you would think that. I mean, yeah, I get it. Kind of like Gremlins, like when it's a Christmas time, you want it to be during Christmas time, and and vice versa.
I hate Christmas season. I can always take a fucked up Christmas horror film. I can always use a new one for my repertoire. So, and what about it, Mr. Yardley? Tell us. I've watched that trailer so many times.
Yeah, well, you know what? So the It Chapter 2 trailer came out, and
a lot of Chastain, which is Yardley's favorite thing.
Yeah, it's a 2 minutes and 52 seconds and 2 minutes and 17 seconds is Jessica Chastain. And the footage that they showed, I think was the footage that they showed at one of those Comic-Cons. So the actual trailer, so to speak, is 38 seconds because that's how long we get with the other characters. But from what I saw, it seemed pretty cool. I mean, the old lady was pretty creepy in it, but there was a shitload of moments where you're like, why the fuck are you still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I would have been like, peace out. Okay, now leave. Okay,
I mean,
now.
absolutely.
Yeah. Come on.
I insist on your cookies. Like, fuck your
Beverly
cookies.
Was smart because she looked at Chastain.
Like, fuck your cookies, lady. I'm getting the fuck out of here. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was solid, and my excitement level is still pretty high.
I also read somewhere that this could be holding a record of the most amount of blood in like one scene or something like that, which I think is going to have a hard time competing with The Shining, but that's what they're saying. So that piques my interest for sure, even more on top of, already being psyched about it. But I'm like, really? That's a lot of blood. So I'm excited to see how that's going to work.
And you know what, girl? I think I accidentally skipped you. Tell us about the Ancestry DNA database.
Well, I am absolutely fascinated with this because it's really going to, I think it's opening up maybe a door that some people don't want to cross into, but it's going to happen regardless. So I'm embracing it, and makes my serial killer and cold case heart happy to see that due to these Ancestry DNA kits, a ton of murders are being solved. And I am seeing these like every other day. I'm seeing a new murder solved either due to Ancestry DNA or DNA. Like they're pulling a lot of these files out and looking at the subjects who they had, the subjects is not really you know what I'm saying? Like the people.
The suspects?
There we go. Thank you. Not enough coffee yet this morning. Subject, suspect.
Words.
And digging and like putting a trail on them, and just, these guys, it's been years there, think they got away with it. And then they find a cigarette, they watch him and get a cigarette out of his trash or a coffee cup out of his work trash and bust him because they're, it's time to kind of go in and try to solve some of these. So this guy, the same database that was used to capture the Golden State Killer, which I really want to do a show about him, helped solve 52-year-old cold case murder of Seattle woman, 20, found strangled and raped in an elevator. Unfortunately, not every case has DNA to it, but every single one that does, they all need to be pulled and run through the system.
Yeah.
There's going to
That'd
be,
be awesome.
and the thing is these DNA kits are so precise now. You know, $30 DNA kits that they can, it doesn't even have to be directly mitochondria or whatever DNA from your mommy or your daddy. They can go to cousins and uncles. Like, somebody in your family has done a DNA test, you know? So they've got a huge opportunity here. Susan Galvin was found dead in an elevator in the Seattle Center on July 13th, 1967. Missing for 3 days, the 20-year-old had been raped and strangled to death. For over 50 years, her death continued to baffle investigators until last month. DNA evidence taken from the scene was matched by Parabon Nanolabs to former soldier Frank Weipsch, whatever, who died in 1987 and lived near the murder scene. The use of the public genealogy database to solve cold cases has taken off in the past year since the Golden State Killer breakthrough in California. Larry Galvin, Susan's brother, thanked the Seattle Police Department for their tenacious investigation that has provided his family with a sense of closure. So I think it's amazing.
As good as it could have been.
Yeah. It's something.
I mean, there wasn't going to be a happy ending there, but it's closure, like you said.
It's something. And so I really think that what they're doing is awesome. And I think we're going to get to the point where even like present day murders that you're going to get DNA off these now, almost unless you're wearing a bubble, you know, because the way they secure the scenes these days, and even the little bit of DNA that, you know, can matter. Whereas back then they weren't preserving the DNA, like, you know, unless it was sperm or blood, hair, tissue, anything else that was not even considered back then. And now you basically, you know, can protect the entire scene, get a DNA forensic person in there and have them save every single little piece of tape and anything, and you're going to find them. And with everybody volunteering their DNA these days, I just think it's just totally going to be a snowball effect of not many people are going to go away with shit now, not even more so than before.
Which is good.
Like
now is the time to stop killing people. If you haven't already, stop attacking other people, unless they really have it coming. But, you know,
unless self-defense.
I don't know what to say.
But
put yourself in a bubble first and then do it.
So then there's this conversation I heard, and I just want to talk about this really quick, where people are starting to have the conversation, which gets into almost Minority Report field, is they think that this like psychopathic tendencies can be found in like the DNA, and trying to like flag people that have those tendencies in a database. So that would be an interesting thing too, to have their DNA already there and flagged as people who have those types of tendencies, which I don't know what the hell that means and how that, I'm a little worried for myself, to be honest with you, but I think we're starting to get into a really strange time in our lives where it's possible that there is a way to find stuff like that pre-murder. So anyway,
Minority Report it is.
Exactly.
Well, I have a silly one. So we're going from like things that a doll can now do with technology to control your life, to DNA, to those cameras. Cameras are everywhere, as we've talked about before, and we have them on our front doors, a lot of us. And so this is an article about a doorbell camera that captured the terrifying moment that a snake attacked a man. And it's just silly. The man's okay, but this guy just comes up to his friend's house, and this video camera, this recording, you can actually watch it. It's a CNN article. And the snake attacked a man. Let's see. So he was wrapped on a porch light, and the guy goes to open the screen door, and the snake pops into the corner of the camera and just bites him on the head, and then just like pops back up to the light. Like,
that
just
is
disappears.
So weird.
Yeah, I get that.
Like, that's not, most snakes aren't quite that aggressive. I mean, It's hard to tell from here, but it doesn't look like he was that close to it. It wasn't like he was trying to touch it. Like that snake was just like, maybe it was a paid attack snake. I don't know. But,
I was like thinking maybe it was one of their pets that got loose, but no,
it's not.
They're like, it's some random ass snake.
Yeah, so the guy's okay. Wasn't venomous. They cleaned out the cut, and he's on antibiotics. But it says the snake was not as lucky because the man's wife had started screaming at the same time, which their cries attracted a neighbor who brought over a hammer and knocked the snake off the light and pummeled the snake to death. So it looks like this 5'5" was taking refuge from recent heavy rains. And so now they're actually spraying light sprays of sulfuric acid because I hear they don't like that over their yard to keep the snakes from doing this.
That's a pretty big snake too. But in the video, it like bites him like right above the eye, like the part where your eyebrow is. But the thing about it is the guy goes, well, first of all, I always die laughing because he gets bitten, then he's like, ow. And then he still proceeds to like go through the door. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I'm going the opposite.
I'm out of here.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'll talk to you later, Rollo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That goddamn snake. But that was pretty funny. But when he yells, ow, and I feel bad for laughing, it's so damn funny, though. But there's no way.
It's like a shocked owl, though, because like, what are you going to say, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So great. I mean, you know, when you're at the lake or camping, okay, there's somewhere in the back of your mind you're thinking a snake could be here somewhere. I mean, it's not like you're constantly paranoid, but you're just walking to a front door and the snake. I mean, what in Oklahoma? We're not in the jungle or anything, you know. So fucking crazy.
But it's a 5-foot snake. I don't know. I think I would have noticed it. Like, I think I would have I don't know. I think that I would have noticed that, but maybe the guy was just, you know, I can totally see you maybe not seeing it, but I know when I'm walking up to a door, I just tend to just kind of look
at the damn door.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just, it's weird. But yeah, anybody, if you get a chance to see that video, it's awesome.
Well, that's
awesomely not awesome.
The look on his face is just hysterical. I mean, he's like, what the fuck just happened? Like, he's like, did this really happen to me? I mean, you can just see his wheels turning like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I couldn't even imagine.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, going from serpents that make me laugh for the small amount of damage they do to proverbial snakes in the grass. Motherfucking Ted Bundy, y'all. Most of you who are listening to this show probably know a little about him, if not a lot. And he is known for having killed at least 30. They don't even know all the names of the people that they found. There's not ID on all of them. And it's rumored that he may have killed many more. And what brought this to my radar now, though, was the film on Netflix. Well, they just did the Ted Bundy tapes, which is the nonfiction doc, which is basically interviews with Ted in prison. But they also just did this new fiction film, mostly fiction, Ted Bundy, it's called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, which is actually what the judge said during the trial, the televised trial that happened in Florida. And we will get to that in just a minute. But, you know, on top of the, obviously the people he killed, that's obviously the biggest part. But that guy, just every single way that he could have gotten lucky or taken advantage, he got himself a really cushy situation in prison, and he just managed to skate on all levels. So this little thing that we're going to read for you guys will kind of go not into every single victim, plus it's pretty brutal, but kind of an overview of his life and the ways that he was a shitty ass hustler. Even if he had never killed a single person, he was a bad guy. So Yardley, if you want to start off with his early life for us.
All right, Ted Bundy's background. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November the 24th, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell, known as Louise, at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His father's identity was never determined with any degree of certainty. Some family members expressed suspicions that Bundy might have been fathered by Louise's own violent, abusive father, Samuel Cowell. But no material evidence has ever been cited to support or to refute this. For the first 3 years of his life, Bundy lived in a Philadelphia home of his maternal grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, who raised him as their son to avoid the social stigma that accompanied birth outside of wedlock. Family, friends, and even young Ted were told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his older sister.
Damn.
Yeah.
Fucked up, man.
But still.
Gross. Sorry, but come on.
Well, I mean, let's be honest here. He's probably not the first person in the history of ever that's probably.
Yeah.
Oh, no. That's happened a lot back then.
Before.
Yeah, and that happened a lot back then.
Yeah.
Ew. I mean, especially if his granddad was his dad from his mother, like, oh boy. Anyway, sorry, my brain's melting on that thought.
There's a couple of situations that I remember growing up where that was the situation, but it's pretty weird. But he eventually discovered the truth, although he had varied recollections of the circumstances. Bundy expressed a lifelong resentment towards his mother for never talking to him about his real father and for leaving him to discover his true parentage for himself. In some interviews, Bundy spoke warmly of his grandparents. In 1987, however, he and other family members told attorneys that Samuel Cowell was a tyrannical bully and a bigot who hated blacks, Italians, Catholics, and Jews. Bundy's grandfather beat his wife and the family dog and swung neighborhood cats by their tails. He once threw Louise's young sister, Julia, down a flight of stairs just for oversleeping. He sometimes spoke aloud to unseen presences, and at least once he flew into a violent rage when the question of Bundy's paternity was raised. Bundy described his grandmother as a timid and obedient woman who periodically underwent electroconvulsive therapy for depression and feared to leave their house toward the end of her life. Bundy occasionally exhibited disturbing behavior even at an early age. Julia recalled awakening one day from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives from the Cowell kitchen. Her 3-year-old nephew was standing by the bed, smiling.
Damn.
Yeah.
Sleep with one eye open. Yeah.
Right? It's like all the ingredients in life to just end up being somehow.
To make a serial killer.
Exactly. A cookbook.
Gosh, all the ingredients for a crazy fucker pie, I suppose.
Yep, pretty much.
I like that. Crazy fucker pie.
Crazy fucker pie. In 1950, Louise changed her surname from Cowell to Nelson. I told you I need more coffee. At the urging of multiple family members, she left Philadelphia with her son to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. In 1951, Louise met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a hospital cook, at an adult singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church. They married later that year, and Johnny Bundy formally adopted Ted. Oh, that poor guy. Johnny and Louise, now forever his name is tied to like one of the worst serial killers in history. Mm-hmm. Thanks. Johnny and Louise conceived 4 children of their own. And although Johnny tried to include his adoptive son in camping trips and other family activities, Ted remained distant. He later complained to his girlfriend that Johnny wasn't his real father, wasn't very bright, and didn't make much money. During high school, he was arrested at least twice on suspicion of burglary and auto theft. When he reached age 18, the details of the incidents were expunged from his record, which is customary in Washington.
Mm-hmm. So this dude was a petty criminal and a hustler at best. After graduating from high school in 1965, Bundy spent a year at the University of Puget Sound before he transferred to the University of Washington in 1966 to study Chinese. And that's another pattern we see with him, is just he was a lost soul. He definitely was trying out all completely different types of things and didn't really know where he wanted to end up in life. So in 1967, he became romantically involved with a UW classmate who is identified by pseudonyms in Bundy biographies, most commonly known, though, as Stephanie Brooks. In early 1968, he dropped out of college and worked as a series of minimum wage jobs. Shortly thereafter, Brooks ended their relationship and returned to her family home in California, frustrated by what she described as Bundy's immaturity and lack of ambition. Now, this is significant, and that's why I left this story in. So just kind of keep her in mind for the next couple paragraphs. Devastated by Brooks's rejection, Bundy traveled to Colorado and then farther east, visiting relatives in Arkansas and Philadelphia, and then enrolling for one semester at Temple University. Bundy was back in Washington by the fall of '69, where he met Elizabeth Klumpfer, identified in Bundy literature as Liz Kendall, and that's who we see in the Netflix movie, a divorcee from Utah, who worked as a secretary at the University of Washington School of Medicine. Their stormy relationship would continue well past his initial incarceration in Utah in 1976. In mid-1970, Bundy, now focused and goal-oriented, re-enrolled at UW, this time as a psychology major. He became an honor student and was well regarded by his professors. And in '71, he took a job at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center, where he met and worked alongside Ann Rule, the author, the former Seattle police officer and aspiring crime writer who would later write one of the most definitive Bundy biographies, The Stranger Beside Me. Rule saw nothing disturbing in Bundy's personality at the time and described him as kind, solicitous, and empathetic. After graduating from UW in '72, Bundy joined Governor Daniel J. Evans's re-election campaign. After Evans was reelected, Bundy was hired as an assistant to Ross Davis, chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. Davis thought well of Bundy and described him as smart, aggressive, and a believer in the system. And in '73, despite mediocre law school admission test scores, Bundy was accepted. And that's another pattern here is the guy skates. The motherfucker just like every time there's something that could go on, even when he's in prison, he skates one way or the other. So he was accepted into law school and on the strength of the letters of the recommendation from Evans and Davis.
All right, so during a trip to California on Republican Party business in the summer of 1973, Bundy rekindled his relationship with Brooks, who marveled at his transformation into a serious, dedicated professional who was seemingly on the cusp of a distinguished legal and political career. He continued to date Clover as well. Neither woman was aware of the other's existence. In the fall of 1973, Bundy matriculated at UPS Law School and continued courting Brooks, who flew to Seattle several times to stay with him. They discussed marriage. At one point, he introduced her to Davis as his fiancée. In January 1974, however, he abruptly broke off all contact. Her phone calls and letters went unreturned. Finally, reaching him by phone a month later, Brooks demanded to know why Bundy had unilaterally ended their relationship without explanation. In fact, calm voice, he replied, "Stephanie, I have no idea what you mean," and hung up. That's fucked up.
Yep.
She never heard from him again. He later explained, "I just wanted to prove myself that I could have married her." But Brooks concluded in retrospect that he had deliberately planned the entire courtship and rejection in advance as vengeance for the breakup she initiated in 1968.
Yeah, that guy had a 5-year long game on getting her back just to dump her. Like,
at least she's still alive.
Yeah, that's true. She got off lucky.
She did.
So by then, Bundy had begun skipping classes at law school. By April, he had stopped attending entirely. As young women began to disappear in the Pacific Northwest.
First two series of murders, Washington and Oregon, there is no consensus on when or where Bundy began killing women. He told different stories to different people and refused to divulge the specifics of his earliest crimes, even as he confessed in graphic detail to dozens of later murders in the days preceding his execution. He told Nelson that he attempted his first kidnapping in 1969 in Ocean City, New Jersey, but did not kill anyone until sometime in 1971 in Seattle. He told psychologist Art Norman that he killed 2 women in Atlantic City in 1969 while visiting family in Philadelphia. He hinted but refused to elaborate to homicide detective Robert Capel that he committed a murder in Seattle in 1972 and another murder in 1973 that involved a hitchhiker near Tumwater. Rule and Capel both believed that he might have started killing as a teenager. Circumstantial evidence suggested that he may have abducted and killed 8-year-old Anne Marie Burr of Tacoma when he was 14 years old in 1961. an allegation that he repeatedly denied. His earliest documented homicides were committed in 1974 when he was 27 years old. By then, his own admission, he had mastered the necessary skills in the era before DNA profiling to leave minimal incriminating forensic evidence at crime scenes. Shortly after midnight on January 4th, 1974, around the time that he terminated his relationship with Brooks, Bundy entered the basement apartment of 18-year-old Karen Sparks, identified as Joni Lenz, Mary Adams, Terry Caldwell by various sources, a dancer and student at UW. After bludgeoning the sleeping woman senseless with a metal rod from her bed frame, he sexually assaulted her with either the same rod or a metal speculum, causing extensive internal injuries. She remained unconscious for 10 days, but survived with permanent physical and mental disabilities. In the early morning hours of February 1st, Bundy broke into the basement room of Linda Ann Healy, a UW undergraduate who broadcast morning radio weather reports for skiers. He beat her unconscious, dressed her in blue jeans, a white blouse, and boots, and carried her away.
So again, this isn't even nearly today going to cover all of the murders that we even know that he committed. So I'm sorry to any, families of victims or victims themselves that we're not doing justice to in this. We'd have to do an entire series just to talk about this. Yeah. My point in this is to show, I feel like the movie that we're going to talk about in a minute sets kind of almost a funny until the end, like kind of campy vibe for whenever we have Ted on screen. And I just want to make it clear that not only is he an incredibly vicious serial killer that's capable of so much more than quote unquote just killing someone. I mean, look at the way that he assaults and hurts these people, but also that he, doesn't even give any closure to the families in the end because his stories change. And you'll hear that if you ever watch the Netflix Ted Bundy tapes. You'll see that throughout our readings here, is that he changes his story. He refuses to tell. He plays little games with people so that not only have they lost someone in this horrific fashion, but also he gets to, still continue messing with their minds. Oh, did I do it? I don't know. Oh, here's in complete disgusting detail how I did it. Like, was the worst. So let's not think it's funny or cute any way that he's been portrayed. So during the first half of 1974, female college students disappeared at the rate of about one per month. Detectives from the King County and Seattle police departments grew increasingly concerned. There was no significant physical evidence, and the missing women had little in common apart from being young, attractive white college students with long hair parted in the middle, which I feel like was the hairstyle of the day, so that's nothing. Yeah. During this period, Bundy was working at Olympia in the Department of Emergency Services, a state agency. This is something you see with him a lot as well, a state agency involved in the search for the missing women. So he spent a lot of time making anti-rape pamphlets and helping with the searches, getting off basically on getting to relive or relish in the fact that he was involved in these disappearances.
Yeah, very common for serial killers. Yep.
Right.
They like to be close to the people investigating, almost as like another high. After killing the person, to be able to be around the investigation is like another, they get off on that. It's crazy.
Well, there's a point in the trials, too, when you look at the Ted Bundy tapes, where he does the cross-exam for a detective who was first on the scene to one of his own murders. And he gets the detective to go into like really minute detail of exactly how the body was found and what the evidence was. And like basically he's getting off on getting to relive the whole thing in the courtroom in front of the victim's family. Like, ick. Anyway. So around this time, he met and dated Carol Ann Boone, a twice-divorced mother of two who, 6 years later, would play an important role in the final phase of his life. Further similarities between the victims were noted. The disappearances all took place at night, usually near ongoing construction work, within a week of midterm or final exams. Yeah, there's a hint for you. All the victims were wearing slacks or blue jeans, and at most crime scenes, there were sightings of a man wearing a cast or a sling and driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. I do want to ask both of you, actually. I was really young towards the end of this, but I remember my mother worrying about her mom because her mom was definitely someone who fit the profile and would have, I was a little girl, and my mom was just like, Grandma is so like she'll meet somebody in a parking lot and she would be the one who would help them to their car and end up getting kidnapped or whatever, which was, do you guys remember anything about this case when you were younger?
I mean, for me, maybe some background stuff, but it just wasn't, it wasn't something that I was necessarily tracking like that.
No,
you know what I'm saying? So.
I didn't really know much about this case until later. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, and that's the thing that he did with wearing a cast or a sling or looking like somebody who needed help. Back then, that was just it. There just wasn't serial killers, and there was no clue that somebody like this would be out there preying on women and using, this kind of disability as a one-up and to get women to relax. I mean, you can fight you can fight a guy with a cast on, but he didn't really have a cast. I mean, it was fake. So. And
also, don't get me wrong. And when I say I heard about background chatter, I'm talking about later on in life.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about things, what I'm saying?
So not on your radar at the time.
It was on nothing. Like probably, I don't even think Tonka trucks were on my radar back then. But, but I will say, as I got older, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of these events with Ted Bundy were things that people still talked about, because whenever you have people going missing, whether it's this situation or we were mentioning the Atlanta child murders and things like that, whenever you have the specter of those things going on, even if it's not necessarily close to where you're at, parents, no matter what, they know that that's out there. So some of the reactions and the protectiveness, you know what I'm saying? You're still going to get that even if it's across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
my mom was just like, she was always an alarmist anyway, but she was definitely like, Grandma's someone who helps people to their cars. And I keep telling her not to do that. And now this guy's going out and killing. I kind of remember that. I was really little, but yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really start hearing much about him until later, because he always seems to be the case study when other serial killers kind of surface. Like they'll say,
see that in this too.
"Oh, he does this like Bundy," or it's similar to a Bundy murder, or this Bundy, or always he always seems to be kind of the poster boy. I mean, and I don't mean that because he was a good looking guy, but literally his MO was always compared with other serial killers from this point on. He kind of changed a lot of. He was the most famous one because of the way his case was handled and the court cases and everything. So that's the only way I knew officially about him, was hearing so much growing up, hearing so many people bring his name up. And then you finally are like, okay, what's the deal with this guy? Like, who is he? And I remember actively looking him up and going, who, what's the deal? Like, who is he? And then I learned. That's really the only way I knew about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or basically for short for, we're not that old.
No, you're older than I am.
I was born in 1974, so I was actively, growing up with him around. But, we were in South Texas, and my parents had their heads at their asses. They're both narcissists. I was riding my bike like 6 miles to convenience stores buying my mom cigarettes. I mean, they didn't give a shit where I was going. So I just didn't have it on my radar, and they didn't either. So there was no Dr. Stranger talk or anything. They were just like, bye, go get me some cigarettes. So,
well, I tell you, Christy, Moni thinks that we've got one foot in the grave and the other on the banana field.
You want me to tell you what the dinosaurs look like?
No,
just kidding.
You said you weren't that old. So I was born in 1983, and the only reason that I remember hearing about this is because by then the trial was coming to its conclusion, and now that was like the hindsight of like, don't help charismatic, handsome men to their cars. You don't never know who they really are.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I'm just joshing with you though, but yeah, neither of us were definitely not really tracking it. But it is kind of funny. But I do think that goes to show you like how messed up this individual is, because the stuff that he did went on. You know
in infamy.
It made precedent for everything else. So and actually, you'll see that as we read this, is he gets used as a profile for other serial killer cases, which of course the asshole Levy. What is the word? Anyway, he leveraged. There we go. He leveraged it to kind of be get more, favors in prison is like, I'll help you catch this other serial killer so I can get off on hearing about it. Plus I'll get extra favors of like less security in prison or ever what else. But to get back to it, let's see. King County Police, finally armed with a detailed description of their suspect in his car, posted flyers throughout the Seattle area. So Liz from the movie, Ann Rule, and a DES employee and a UW psychology professor all recognized the profile, the sketch, the car, and reported Bundy as a possible suspect. So that's one thing you see in the movie, that they act like kind of Liz's, calling about him was the only one. Multiple people saw that he could have been the guy and actually called, but the detectives were receiving 200 tips per day and thought it was unlikely that a clean-cut student with no adult criminal record could be the perpetrator.
Yeah, that is crazy. Because not only as police officers, you have to put all this stuff together, it's also the fact that you have to dig through so many people, some people who are just BSing around, calling you with tips. So I know that has to be just even more stress to some of the things that they were trying to do. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about some things that went down in Idaho, Utah, and Colorado. So in August 1974, Bundy received a second acceptance from the University of Utah Law School and moved to Salt Lake City, leaving Clover in Seattle. While he called Clover often, he dated at least a dozen other women. When he studied the first-year law curriculum a second time, he was devastated to find out that the other students had some intellectual capacity that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. It was a great disappointment to me, he said. A new string of homicides began the following month, including 2 that would remain undiscovered until Bundy confessed to them shortly before his execution. On September the 2nd, he raped and strangled a still unidentified hitchhiker in Idaho. Then he either disposed of the remains immediately in a nearby river or returned the next day to photograph and dismember the corpse. On October the 2nd, he seized 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox in Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City, and dragged her into a wooded area, intending to de-escalate his pathological urges, he claimed, by raping and then releasing her. But he strangled her, accidentally, he said, in the process of trying to silence her screams.
Wow.
Yeah, her remains were buried near Capitol Reef National Park, some 200 miles south of Holiday, but were never found. In November, Elizabeth Clover called King County Police a second time after reading that young women were disappearing in towns surrounding Salt Lake City. Detective Randy Hergesheimer of the Major Crimes Division interviewed her in detail. By then, Bundy had risen considerably on the King County hierarchy of suspicion. But the Sammamish witness, considered most reliable by detectives, failed to identify him in a photo lineup. In December, Clover called the Salt Lake City County Sheriff's Office and repeated her suspicions. Bundy's name was added to their list of suspects, but at that time, no credible forensic evidence linked him to the Utah crimes. In January 1975, Bundy returned to Seattle after his final exams and spent a week with Clover, who did not tell him that she had reported him to the police on 3 separate occasions. She made plans to visit him in Salt Lake City in August.
Arrest and first trial. On August 16, 1975, Bundy was arrested by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward in Granger, which is a Salt Lake City suburb. Hayward had observed Bundy cruising a residential area in the pre-dawn hours. Bundy fled the area at high speed after seeing the patrol car. The officer searched the car after he noticed that the Volkswagen's front passenger seat had been removed and placed on the rear seats. He found a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other items initially assumed to be burglary tools. Yeah, like, what else would you use that shit for? I don't know anyone who
Murdering?
I don't know anyone else carrying around a handbag or bags of that shit just for fun. Just in case I might need some handcuffs or crowbars, some pantyhose, and trash bags.
You never know.
Bundy explained that the ski mask was for skiing. He had found the handcuffs in a dumpster, and the rest were common household items. Exactly.
It just happened to be put together in my car.
Household items. They're not car items. They're household items.
Yeah.
Unless your car is your house, which his was not. However, Detective Jerry Thompson remembered a similar suspect and car description from the November 1974 DeRanche kidnapping, which matched Bundy's name from Clofer's December 1974 phone call. In a search of Bundy's apartment, police found a guide to Colorado ski resorts with a check mark by the Wildwood Inn and a brochure that advertised the Viewmont High School play in Bountiful where Deborah Kent had disappeared. The police did not have sufficient evidence to detain Bundy, and he was released on his own reconnaissance. Bundy later said that searchers missed a collection of Polaroid photographs of his victims. He destroyed the photographs after he was released. Damn. In November, the three principal Bundy investigators, Jerry Thompson from Utah, Robert Capel from Washington, and Michael Fisher from Colorado, met in Aspen, Colorado, and exchanged information with 30 detectives and prosecutors from 5 states. While officials left the meeting, later known as the Aspen Summit, convinced that Bundy was the murderer they sought, they agreed that more hard evidence would be needed before he could be charged with any of the murders. In other words, he needs to kill more people?
Yeah, right?
On February 23rd, 1976, Bundy stood trial for the DeRanche kidnapping. On the advice of his attorney, John O'Connell, Bundy waived his right to a jury due to the negative publicity surrounding the case. On March 1st, after a 4-day bench trial and a weekend of deliberation, Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. found him guilty of kidnapping and assault. On June 30th, he was sentenced to serve a minimum of 1 to a maximum of 15 years in the Utah State Prison. That's all? 15 years. In October, he was found hiding in the bushes of the prison yard carrying an escape kit, road maps, airline schedules, and a Social Security card, and spent several weeks in solitary confinement. Later that month, Colorado authorities charged him with Karen Campbell's murder. After a period of resistance, he waived extradition proceedings and was transferred to Aspen in January 1977.
So now we get into his escapes. So on June 7th, 1977, Bundy was transported 40 miles from the Garfield County Jail in Aspen for a preliminary hearing. He had elected to serve as his own attorney and as such was excused by the judge from wearing handcuffs or leg shackles. This is just one of the many privileges he gets. During a recess, he asked to visit the courthouse's law library to research his case. Bundy was concealed behind a bookcase when he opened a window and jumped from the second story, spraining his right ankle as he landed. After shedding an outer layer of clothing, he walked through Aspen roadblocks that were being set up on the outskirts, and then hiked southward to the Aspen Mountains. And I wanted to ask you guys, what did you think about that scene when you saw it in the film?
Oh, for me, this is the thing where he was like chiseling through the grate, right?
No, the first time when he jumped out the window.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know. I giggle.
Yeah. I mean, I honest to God, I think in this
that was real life, though?
That really happened. I mean, that really happened.
Yeah.
I know that based on hearing tons of podcasts about Ted Bundy, that I don't know about the way the setup was, but they did give him his own office to work on his case, and he jumped out the window. And I just find that how stupid can you be, in the cops and the courthouse's part to not be monitoring him, not having somebody in the room with him while he's doing all of this. I don't know. It just goes to show you the different time that they were in, and there's no way anybody would be allowed that kind of special treatment these days. No way.
Well, and even when you watch the movie, and they took a hell of a lot of liberties with it, but it was really odd at the distance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they were that they were giving him. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Moni. I do think that the movie had a kind of a weird levity to it. It
like admiration almost more than like the crime itself. Yeah.
Look how cute and charismatic he is.
Yeah,
like, no,
exactly.
That's kind of the point of this background here.
Well, the thing I have to give up for Bundy is that he is a very smart guy. Like a lot of these serial killers are stupid. Like they think they're smart, but they're actually not very smart at all. You know, he really did practice the jumping in his cell. Like he prepares, he thinks things through, he plans. He could have jumped out that window that day. He saw it open, but instead, which would have probably been a disaster for him. But he planned and figured and plotted, and that is why he did escape successfully so many times. I mean, I have to give that to him. He's a smart guy. He just chose to use his powers for evil instead of good, you know? So he could have been...
That's what the judge says, both in real life and in the film, is like, this could have gone very different, but you went a different way. So
I mean, he could have been an amazing attorney.
Do you think that there was a certain amount of attention or celebrity that actually made people kind of turn a blind eye to certain things?
Yeah, I do. And I think he played on that. I think he loved the attention. I think he knew he was charismatic and attractive. And he definitely got it to a level where people were like fans of his and didn't want him to go to prison and shit. Like,
well, I think, and I honestly, this is where I think we've made a huge mistake in how we handle criminals. Is a lot of people think for transparency we need to see these people on trial and we need to hear every detail of their life. But unfortunately, that also is a pendulum swing of certain people perceiving this as, if I'm going to be famous, this is the only way I can be. This is the way I'm going to be known, and it's worth me to commit these types of acts to be known for this, just to have my name out there. And then also, and I think, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, and we'll get more into that too as we look at the televised trial, because we'll talk about why the judge would have chosen that as well. So
and it's also kind of created for him like an idolization in a weird way. And we even see that on our own page. I mean, when you're talking about Bundy, everybody's like, wow.
The bite mark
tattoo. I want his tattoo, cool. Bite mark tattooed on me. And I'm like, really?
No.
I mean, why? You know? He's a fucked up dude. There's no, like, it's like he's famous. And it's just bizarre to me. And I think we kind of misstepped in our history, creating a huge public, news cycles and everything on these people.
For sure. So near the summit, this is after he jumped out of the window, he broke into a hunting cabin, stole food, clothing, and a rifle. He continued south the next day. He became lost in the forest and wandered aimlessly. And of course, he had constant pain. Poor guy, because he had sprained his ankle, which if I jumped from a second-story window, I probably would have broke everything inside me, but he only has a sprained ankle.
You know what it reminded me of? Something else when I said that I Googled, it just reminded me of like that scene of Omar in The Wire, except he didn't have that much pressure on him when he jumped out. But anyway.
Yeah. So he stole a car, and he's now sleep-deprived and in constant pain. So he drives back to Aspen, where two police officers noticed his car weaving out of a lane and pulled him over. He had been a fugitive for 6 days. And, I got to say, too, as far as him being a smart guy, like Christy said, who knew that he had that level of survivalist in him, hiking through the forest and whatever else. But back in jail in Glenwood Springs, he ignored the advice of his friends and legal advisors to stay put. The case against him was already weak at best. So as you were saying, he was smart, but he was extremely arrogant. So the case was deteriorating steadily, and things were consistently resolving in his favor. Significant bits of evidence were being ruled inadmissible. A more rational defendant might have realized that he stood a good chance of acquittal, and that beating the murder charge in Colorado would probably have dissuaded other prosecutors. With as little as a year and a half to serve on the DeRanch conviction, had Ted persevered, he probably would have been a free man. But instead, he assembled a new escape plan. He acquired a detailed floor plan. He probably thought he was too good for prison, honestly. He probably was like, this is not good enough for me. I'm out of here. Yeah. So he acquired a detailed floor plan of the jail and a hacksaw blade from other inmates, accumulated $500 in cash, smuggled in over a 6-month period by visitors, including Carol Ann Boone in particular. During the evenings, while other prisoners were showering, he sawed a hole about a foot square between the steel reinforcement bars in the cell's ceiling, and, having lost 35 pounds, was able to wriggle through it into a crawl space. Talk about a living snake in the grass.
That's what I mean. Like, I have to admire his perseverance and his planning and
when you got more women to rape and kill, you
I guess you're gonna light a fire under your ass. But and honestly, like,
no time for this prison shit.
What a true, absolute, insane psychopath! You are free. You're free. You disappeared. Yeah. And what do? Go kill and rape more women. It's like, good God, you idiot.
Nope, he can't stop. So in the weeks that followed, he made a series of practice runs exploring the space, and people were actually complaining, the inmates were complaining that there was movement in the ceiling, but nobody investigated. So on the night of December 30th, with most of the jail staff on Christmas break and the nonviolent prisoners on furlough with their families, so everybody's away, Bundy piles books and files in his bed, covers them with a blanket to simulate his sleeping body, and climbs into the crawl space. He broke through the ceiling into the apartment of the chief jailer, who was out for the evening, changed into street clothes from the jailer's closet, and walked out the front door, to freedom. He stole a car, drove eastward, but the car soon broke down in the mountains on Interstate 70. A passing motorist gave him a ride to Vail. From there, he caught a bus to Denver, where he boarded a morning flight to Chicago. In Glenwood Springs, the jail's skeleton crew did not discover his escape until noon on December 31st, more than 17 hours later. By then, Bundy was already in Chicago. So while in Chicago, Bundy began attacking and murdering co-eds again.
You don't learn. Honestly, no, here's the question I have to ask for you guys. And it might be both. It might be a little bit of both. Do you think that he thinks he's so smart that he won't get caught again? Or do you think he literally cannot control this murderous rape urge in him? Okay.
I don't think anybody who kills at this level can stop if they're, physically able to do it anymore. So that's that. And clearly he thought he was above the law or too good for it or whatever, because he just kept leaving jail. So.
He's like, I don't want to be here no more. Bye.
It's just, that's crazy. There's something that's kind of drawing him to do that. But on February the 12th, with insufficient cash to pay his overdue rent and a growing suspicion that police were closing in on him, Bundy stole a car and fled Tallahassee, driving westward across the Florida Panhandle. 3 days later, at about 1 a.m., he was stopped by Pensacola police officer David Lee near the Alabama state line after a wants and warrants check showed his Volkswagen Beetle was stolen. When told he was under arrest, Bundy kicked Lee's legs out from under him and took off running. Lee fired a warning shot, followed by a second round, gave chase and tackled him. The two struggled over Lee's gun before the officer finally subdued and arrested Bundy. In the stolen vehicle were 3 sets of IDs belonging to female FSU students, 21 stolen credit cards, and a stolen television set. Also found were a pair of dark-rimmed non-prescription glasses and a pair of plaid slacks, later identified as the disguise worn by Richard Burton Fire Department in Jacksonville, as Lee transported his suspect to jail unaware that he had just arrested one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. He heard Bundy say, "I wish you had killed me." Boone had championed Bundy's innocence throughout all of his trials and felt deeply betrayed by his admission that he was, in fact, guilty. She moved back to Washington with her daughter and refused to accept his phone call on the day that he was executed. She was hurt by his relationship with Diana Weiner, Nelson wrote, and devastated his sudden wholesale confessions in the last days. Hagemeyer was present during Bundy's final interviews and investigations on the eve of his execution. He talked of suicide. He did not want to give the state the satisfaction of watching him die, Hagemeyer said.
Wow. The Florida trials and marriage. Following a change of venue to Miami, Bundy stood trial for the Chi Omega homicides and assaults in June 1979. It's crazy that all of this happened in just like 5 years. I mean, he's lived enough jail escapes and murders for, most of us in 100 times over. But the trial was covered by 250 reporters from 5 continents and was the first to be televised nationally in the United States. Despite the presence of 5 court-appointed attorneys, Bundy again handled much of his own defense. Again, that whole "I'm smarter than anybody else." From the beginning, he sabotaged the entire defense effort out of spite, distrust, and grandiose delusion, Nielsen later wrote. Ted was facing murder charges with a possible death sentence, and all that mattered to him, apparently, was that he be in charge. According to Mike Minerva, a Tallahassee public defender and member of the defense team, a pretrial plea bargain was negotiated in which Bundy would plead guilty to killing Levy, Bowman, and Leach in exchange for a firm 75-year prison sentence. Prosecutors were amenable for a deal by one account because prospects of losing a trial were very good. Bundy, on the other hand, saw the plea deal not only as a means of avoiding the death penalty, but also as a tactical move. He could later enter his plea, then wait a few years for evidence to disintegrate or become lost, and then for witnesses to die, move on, or retract their testimony. Once again, the case against him had deteriorated beyond repair. He could file a post-conviction motion to set aside the plea and secure an acquittal. At the last minute, however, Bundy refused to deal. It made him realize he was going to have to stand up in front of the whole world and say he was guilty, Minerva said. He just couldn't do it.
Son of a bitch. So, yeah, the jury deliberated for less than 7 hours before convicting him on July 24th, 1979, of the Bowman and Levy murders, 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder for the assaults on Kleiner, Chandler, and Thomas, and 2 counts of burglary. Trial judge Edward Coward, played by motherfucking John Malkovich in the film, imposed death sentences for the murder convictions. 6 months later, a second trial took place in Orlando for the abduction and murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy was found guilty once again after less than 8 hours deliberation, due principally to the testimony of an eyewitness who saw him leading Leach from a schoolyard to his stolen van. During the penalty phase of the trial, Bundy took advantage of an obscure Florida law. Now, of course, Florida has an obscure law, sorry, providing that a marriage declaration in court in the presence of a judge constituted as a legal marriage. He was questioning former Washington State DES co-worker Carol Ann Boone, who we mentioned before, who had moved to Florida to be near Bundy, had testified on his behalf during both trials and was again testifying on his behalf as a character witness. He asked her to marry him. She accepted, and Bundy declared to the court that they were legally married. On February 10th, 1980, Bundy was sentenced for a 3rd time to death by electrocution. As the sentence was announced, he reportedly stood and shouted, "Tell the jury they were wrong." This death sentence would be the one ultimately carried out nearly 9 years later. Now, October of 1981, Boone gave birth to a daughter and named Bundy as the father. While conjugal visits, so he even got that, is what I'm trying to say. He got conjugal visits and just really everything he could have wanted while he was in prison, except access to kill more people. So, the inmates had pooled their money in order to bribe guards to allow them intimate time alone with their female visitors.
All right, let's talk about death row and confession. So sometime during this period, Bundy was attacked by a group of his fellow death row inmates. Though he denied having been assaulted, a number of inmates confessed to the crime, characterized by one source as a gang rape. Shortly thereafter, he was charged with a disciplinary infraction of unauthorized correspondence with another high-profile criminal, John Hinckley Jr.
Wow,
In
okay.
October,
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. In October 1984, Bundy contacted Robert Keppel and offered to share his self-proclaimed expertise in a serial killer psychology and the ongoing hunt in Washington for the man who would later be called the Green River Killer. Keppel and Green River Task Force Detective Dave Reichert interviewed Bundy, but Gary Leon Ridgway remained at large for another 17 years. That is so funny about how, just it's a trip, isn't it?
It was just another way that he got off on getting to be part of something and getting to recount murders. And in reality, they didn't even catch the guy for another almost 20 years. And I did want to mention the gang rape. And here's why I wanted to mention the gang rape. When you watch the film, you see this, Zac Efron, handsome guy, kind of goofy, going around in this freaking prison, like around big time prison guys. And you're like, there's no way that didn't happen to him while he was in there. And sure enough, and they don't say anything about it in the film. And quite frankly, not that rape is ever good, but for somebody who raped so many women, beat so many women, killed so many people, did all the shit he did, I was just kind of excited to see that not only did this happen to him as it would, but also that he was too embarrassed to admit that that's what had happened. I'm like, really? You're going to be the one that's like, no, I wasn't assaulted, after you go around assaulting like at least 30 people? Like, come on.
How's that feel, asshole?
Anyway, exactly. I just wanted to put that, literally, how does that feel, asshole? Haha.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw that in there to know that he got a little bit, because quite frankly, his death was too easy. We'll get into that in a second, but at least this happened.
Yeah. Yep. When it became clear that no further stays would be forthcoming from the courts, Bundy supporters began lobbying for the only remaining option, executive clemency. Diana Weiner, a young Florida attorney and Bundy's last purported love interest, asked the families of several Colorado and Utah victims to petition Florida Governor Bob Martinez for a postponement to give Bundy time to reveal more information. All refused. The families already believed that the victims were dead and that Ted had killed them, wrote Nelson. They didn't need his confession. Martinez made it clear that he would not agree to further delays in any case. We are not going to have the system manipulated, he told reporters. For him to be negotiating for his life over the bodies of victims is despicable. Yes, it is.
Oh, that's me. Haha.
I'm like, hello?
Hello, is anybody there? Boone had championed Bundy's innocence. This was Carol Ann, and we see her in the film throughout all the trials, and felt deeply betrayed by his admission that he was in fact guilty. She moved back, after she had her kid with him, she moved back to Washington with her daughter and refused to accept his phone call on the day that he was executed. She was hurt by his relationship with Diana and devastated by his sudden wholesale confession in his last days. Hegmeyer was present during Bundy's final interviews with investigators. On the eve of his execution, he talked of suicide because he did not want to give the state the satisfaction of watching him die.
All right, so Bundy died. Let's talk about his death. Bundy died in the Radford electric chair at 7:16 a.m. on January 24th, 1989. He was 42 years old. Hundreds of revelers, including 20 off-duty police officers, by one account, sang, danced, and set off fireworks in a pasture across the street from the prison as the execution was carried out. Then cheered loudly as the white hearse containing his corpse departed the prison. So his body was cremated in Gainesville and his ashes scattered at an undisclosed location in the Cascade Range of Washington State, according to his will. Now, ironically, that was an area that some of the murders took place, but something else that was interesting, that even though the revelers were out there doing things and setting off fireworks, actually the individual who set off the fireworks was arrested for setting off the fireworks. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely, because I was watching another doc on it, and it was basically showing the party of the people who were having outside. And no doubt the guy who set off the fireworks got arrested. So that's kind of funny, but not funny.
Well, he probably escaped from prison and killed people. Oh, wait, no. So I wanted to mention in accordance with his will, because fuck that also. This guy killed all these people, and there's people that they still haven't identified who they were. There's people that they suspect he killed that they have never found. And he gets to get his ashes scattered in undisclosed locations so that they won't be disturbed, and gets everything in accordance with his will. Fuck that. That guy took advantage of the system every possible way for years. And honestly, a quick electrocution by chair, which they talk about in the movie too, was too quick for that motherfucker. So, on that note, what did you guys think of the actual extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile film on Netflix?
Yeah, well, when I checked it out, we kind of touched on it. It did kind of, I don't know, it almost made him a little bit too charismatic, kind of in my opinion. I thought the acting was okay. I actually see, like in the show notes, you were asking Oh, you changed it up a little bit because I think you were asking about like what he looked like in the movie, as opposed to in real life. I do think that they glammed him up a lot more.
Yeah. Especially when he got to take his shirt off and he's got Zac Efron's body. I seriously doubt Ted Bundy looked like that under his clothes, but who knows?
Yeah, and also sometimes I think that it seemed like they made him a little too hammy in certain situations. But all in all, I guess if you have Netflix, it's something that you could definitely check out. But I probably think that people would get more out of the Ted Bundy tapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Christy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. It's worth watching. I like the cast. I thought they did good with the cast. And, as I was watching the show or the movie, I was Googling each person's name to see what they look like in real life. I mean, I thought they did a good job with all of that. I stick by my previous statement that they kind of glamorized him a little too much. He doesn't need that. He's already got kind of a cult following, even today, as we just discussed. I mean, I don't know the case ins and outs perfectly. I felt like they followed most of it correctly.
They did, and Cowart was also an interesting judge if you're going to do a film to show, and getting John Malkovich was perfect. But excuse me, all those things that he says in court that are pretty sensationalized on their own were actually things that had been said. But this was based off of Liz, as she's called in the film. This was based off of her memoir of her time with Ted Bundy. Excuse me. However, I do think that I haven't read that book, but I seriously doubt I'm sure she put things in there to show kind of why she was so attracted to him and stayed with him, but I seriously doubt that she made him the lovable clown that happened to kill people the way that the movie kind of made him out to be. Yeah. So I thought that was a really odd choice on the filmmaker's part. But I got to ask you, Christy, because I hear this from all kinds of girls. Okay, not Zac Efron, but actual Ted Bundy. Mm-hmm. If you didn't know he was a serial killer, which is hard to not know that now, to try to look at it that way, would you have found him attractive?
So this is going to be a weird answer. In current day, no.
Yeah.
If I was back in the 70s, yeah, I probably would have, because looks and people's aesthetics were different back then and what we found attractive. He was a smart guy, and when you see his tapes and stuff that Yardley just referred to, he was funny. I mean, he was somebody like when you look at the BTK killer or Jeffrey Dahmer, I never would have touched those guys with a 10-foot pole. Not that Jeffrey Dahmer would have wanted to touch me with a 10-foot pole, but I didn't find Jeffrey Dahmer attractive. I didn't, a lot of people did. I can see the attraction to Ted Bundy, and I can think back then I might have been. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Today, he's not attractive to me at all. I don't, when you compare him to other, to the men around us now. But yeah, I mean, I get the attraction. When he wasn't the whole craziness that how he behaved in the trial and everything, that's not attractive to me. I don't get all these women that were saw him on the TV and went to his trial and were gaga over him. No, I don't get that. But just normal day Ted Bundy, I can see it. I could see me possibly being attracted to just the normal, funny, smart guy. But it does seem like he has kind of a cold edge that there's no hiding. So I don't think it would have lasted long. Yeah. I could see an initial attraction.
Yeah, they're kind of cold.
Yeah, he did
if there's a look to that.
Yeah, I mean, they show in the movie him leaving Liz and he was in prison. She didn't, or jail. She didn't know that, and he just walks in and tries to pretend nothing, he hadn't been gone and not been in contact with her. That wouldn't have worked out for me that well. I can't imagine just overlooking all of that and continuing this, love that you've got for him. I think genuinely there would have been an attraction, and then seeing some of his weird red flags, I would have been no, you're not worth it.
Well, and there's a lot to unpack with Liz and with all the women that were close to him. But I do just want to say the movie made it look like and at the end he goes, "I've never laid a hand on you. I've never raised my voice." Just so we're clear, in real life, or at least according to Liz's memoir, he like tried to poison her at one point. Like, motherfucker, like, went after her several times, threatened her. Like, he wasn't just the nice guy. That cold side couldn't stay hidden 100%.
Nope.
Sorry, Yardley, what were you going to say?
I was going to also say the one of the things that was pretty disappointing with watching that was the fact that they didn't take their story all the way through the execution. I was like, bring on the fucking electric chair.
Yeah.
And nope, you didn't get anything. I really
every
wish...
time he's picking up girls, they like cut away, so you don't see, not that you want to see the murder, but it's like, oh, here's cute Ted being, charismatic with ladies, and then cut away, and then, story that the lady gets killed afterward. Like, they really glamorized him a lot. They
glossed over
I thought it was weird for them to definitely skip over, at least, even if they, and like I said, I'm not necessarily saying that I cared one way or the other about actually seeing them portray the electrocution, but I at least would have wanted to see, like, maybe the night before and his walk to the chamber or something. So I thought that they kind of dropped the ball.
Yeah, well, the final scene where she says, "Release me," and she's all dramatic and she's trying to get him to confess, and then he ends up writing hacksaw when she says, like, "How did the head go missing, Ted?" And he writes hacksaw on the... What did you guys think that was? Because of how the tone of the rest of the film had been, was that effective and creepy, or was that kind of just something they threw in at the end?
Something they threw in.
See, I felt like it was effectively creepy because I felt like she had been, gaslighted this entire relationship. He never, ever, ever admitted to doing anything and, pushed everything and everybody's fault. It was everybody else's fault, or he was, set up, or never once was there even just the slightest hint that this guy, that he was going to admit to anything. And then for him to just full on just give her answer was shocking to me. Like, whoa, he went there. And as trying to put her in her place, I've been around psychopaths. My mother is a sociopath, actually diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and bipolar. She's in a mental institution. I grew up around psychos that just do not ever accept responsibility for their behavior. So that was a little bit impactful for me. Like, wow, he literally gave her something finally after the decades that this has been going on, or the years or whatever. I don't know how long they were together before he got busted, but to finally give her something, to let there be that closure that she desperately needed from him, it was kind of shocking to me. So I thought that was handled well. I do agree with you guys, though. They glossed over a lot of things that just doesn't help with glamorizing him more. Like, we need to see the ugly, too, when you're talking about somebody like this. So I think they ended up giving him more fans in the end than genuine people just wanting to learn more about him.
Yeah. So unless you guys have any final thoughts on him, on the real Ted Bundy, or on the film, anybody? Last call?
No, I mean, I think it's worth a watch as long as you go into it with the acknowledgement that it's not just exactly like what happened, and they do go miss some of the mark on things. But I thought Zach did a good job. I mean, he can't help the way they aesthetically portray Ted Bundy. He was told to do something and he did it, and I thought he did pretty good at it. I wasn't I wasn't really overly critical of him. It was an interesting choice to cast him in it, and I thought he did all right, and I think it was worth a watch. I love John Malkovich. Anything that you want to put him in, I will suffer through any day. But although I didn't suffer through this at all, I thought it was okay. It was good. The ending was better to me than a lot, like you said, a lot of the murders and things. So that's really all I have to say about it.
Yardley?
You know what? I pretty much echo the same things. I would recommend it if someone was interested in it, but I would, like I said earlier, I would recommend the Ted Bundy tapes before this.
Yeah, All right. Well, with that being said, Miss Christie, do you have a show planned for next week, or is that a TBD?
It's to be determined. I don't. I completely forgot that I even needed to plan one, and then I thought about just throwing something in here, just last minute. But I don't want to do that, so I will.
You posted that thing about that monster movie. Do you remember on the Creeping It Real Facebook page?
Oh, yeah, the Headhunter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you watched that?
I haven't yet, and I don't want to do another review, and so I'm trying to find another subject. I did read the reviews of it because I watched a movie last night. I ended up just watching Signs because it was on, and I was like, hey, I kind of like that movie. And I didn't want to have to overthink it, but I was looking at watching it, and I'm not quite sure it's going to be up my alley. I mean, I will watch it if we need to review it. It doesn't there's not any talking, and it's just basically him. And there's really no killing of the monsters. You just kind of see their heads. And so it's one of those, I think you're really going to love it or you're not, or you're going to hate it. And a lot of people think it's absolutely amazing and a masterpiece. But reading the reviews, I was kind of like, this doesn't look like, I can appreciate that stuff, but that's just not really the kind of movies that I watch. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'll probably watch it. It wasn't free. I would have had to have rented it. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to go there yet. Once it comes out for free, I'll check it out. But anyway, I'll announce something in the next day or two and set something up. I'm going to find something good.
We shall wait with bated breath for sure. Right. So while we have you on, where can we find you on the socials?
You can find me on Instagram at creepinitchristy. And on Twitter at creepin_it.
And Mr. Yardley?
You can follow me on Twitter at militant_marker.
I am Rebel Moni, MONY, on Twitter. And just to make it confusing, I am Moni Bear on Instagram. It's MONI. Hope to see you all out there. I've noticed more followers have been coming in, so thank you for your interactions and for your continued reviews. And with that, we wish you a very happy week.
Creep it real.
Creep it real, y'all.
I was afraid that you're coming today.